What's up, guys? It's been a minute since I've been on YouTube. Where did I leave off? I guess the front tubs. So yeah, let's get back into it. Let's finish the front tubs, the rear tubs, and basically everything else on the car, and also do 2 seasons of racing in this one YouTube video. But no, in all seriousness, things got pretty busy the last time I tried to do the YouTube stuff. I was building the sedan from scratch, and I basically came to the realization that this was taking way too long. Recording video, editing video, uploading it, it just was gonna take me twice as long to get the car done. So I basically stopped doing it. And yeah, I finished the car, done 2 seasons of pretty successful racing, I would say. But now I kind of want to start YouTube back up again just because I have a little bit more free time and I kind of want to basically share more content with you guys. But in this video, I wanted to basically summarize what has happened. And how do you summarize to your... But anyway, let's get into it. So first picture here, this is me picking up the sedan in Florida with the good old trusty Ridgeline. Front tubs basically mostly completed here. You can see just how much material I cut out and how much space there is. So similar process in the rear, just kept cutting material out to make room for the tire, and then we used a trailer fender to create the tub. And it was pretty difficult because we had to cut a lot of material out, and it was quite intricate with the OEM sheet metal. But as you can see here, it was well worth it because look at all that compression travel we gained. I would estimate about 2 inches, which is a lot, especially when you're running a big wheel and tire like this. And it shows how difficult it was getting this to work, especially when you're going through the door jamb. But there it is, tubs completed, car on the ground, but little did I know how much more work I had left ahead of me. And at this point I started work on the interior, and I wanted to sit further back to improve weight distribution, which means I needed a pedal box to move the pedals closer to the driver, and created a custom frame to mount them. And then back on the ground with my little vice grip steering wheel. But the funny part was, because the wheel and tires were so wide, I had no steering lock, so moving the car was always a pain in the ass. But yeah, once the car was outside, this thing looked incredible, absolutely slammed. I really love how you can see the rear tubs in this picture, both through the door jamb and inside the car. They look pretty awesome. And the goal is to just run it as low as possible. Super touring, JTCC is the name of the game. And here's the car back on the trailer, on its way to get caged by Adam Brock. And while it was there, I worked on the doors, gutted them, took out a ton of weight, shaved the door moldings, cleaned them up, and did the first round of painting with gunmetal metallic, and made those sweet door pull handles. So I'm planning the cage routing here. And here's another milestone complete, cage finished. Adam did fantastic work. He mostly deals with rally cages, and that's why I went with him, because I wanted as strong of a cage as possible, and that's what he did. He tied it to every nook and cranny on this car, all the pillars, the roof. We tied it to the front suspension, the frame rails. He did some seriously robust seat mounting. The pedal box frame was welded in, the steering column. Everything about this cage was absolutely beautiful, and here's me daydreaming about actually driving this thing. So once again, thanks Adam Brock for the fantastic cage work, because it really came into handy the following year. So here's a better look at the front sway bar, which we incorporated into the frame rail. We added some weld nuts. So this sway bar goes through the engine bay, And it just uses the rear ASR kit that you can put on any Honda. And then now we are working on the front upper control arm clearance. This was a prototype arm just to kind of get an idea of what I needed. But yeah, you can see how high this arm goes and how much I had to cut out. And then we worked on making a custom cap just for this setup. So that was a fun little project. Then I decided to stitch roll the majority of the chassis, which was a ton of work but well worth it. I mainly wanted to reinforce all the areas where the tubs were, as well as the rear subframe and front suspension components. And then some caps were created to cover up some of the holes in the firewall, especially where the cage passed through. And then we added some seam sealer on the backside to make it waterproof. And after that, it was time for paint. So this was a lot of sanding. Thanks Chandler for helping out with that. So we started off with some epoxy primer, and then after that, the single stage base coat, which was an absolute nightmare. It was pretty thick and hard to shoot, and the cage was so intricate that it was hard to get in all the nooks and crannies. But the end results were absolutely fantastic. But I don't think I'll ever do it again just because of how much it sucked. And because I love paint, I also stripped the entire underbody of the car and undercoated it, which was even worse. Next up was mocking up the engine, and we went with custom mounts here, courtesy of Passport Performance, for a few reasons. One, to raise the engine up to have adequate oil pan clearance, and two, because I removed the OEM driver side mount, so we had to weld in a little custom bracket. To align the engine, I used a string that goes across the shock towers, and then a digital level gauge to make sure everything was leveled and aligned properly. Then the mounts were welded in permanently, and the end result was plenty of ground clearance, and it even fit under the hood, but just barely. So once again, thanks Hasport for helping out with that project. That was critical in making sure this car actually worked on track, just because how low it actually is. And also thanks Angel for these awesome pics. A good friend of mine from Cali stopped by to check the build out and snap some cool pictures. And of course, Senna definitely approves here. And then yeah, here's the car outside. We got the replica JTCC Civic Ferio wing, which looked awesome. Can't really say it did much in terms of performance. So back to the engine bay, we got some seam sealer here, all primered up and ready to go. And then now we're painting the engine bay. Also came out really well. I added clear to the engine bay this time just because I wanted a little bit more protection and a little bit more gloss. And then yeah, sad picture of the hatch in the background. Finally, at this point, it was just time to start installing all the parts. So starting with engine bay, interior, and then also work on electricals. So here we got a busman relay set up with some micro PDMs that I'll explain here in this next video. All right, got the electronic system mostly installed. So to turn this thing on, I press that button. So red light indicates we got ignition, and then this blinks. So when I press that, that's my second ignition switch. So now I got everything lit up. I hit the kill switch, kills everything. Kills the power to the ECU, all the relays, nothing will work. So that's basically an example of what I have going on. Pretty sick. So here you can see the micro PDM in action. It's really good stuff. It's pretty capable. Can do all the stuff you need to do: headlights, taillights, blinkers. Obviously, I have a flashers button set up when I want to, pass some people that are in my way. So this was a fun little project. I did a stealth install of an FIA rain light within the OEM taillight. So in rain races, you can turn it on and it will blink, and then it goes solid under braking. And that's all connected to my rain button on the PDM, which turns on my wipers as well. So in a rain race, I press one button and both of those things turn on automatically. Let's get into details here. This is Rywire's new Motorsports plug-and-play harness for the K-swaps. And this goes directly into the Haltech Elite 1500 ECUs. So these two couplers, plus a C101, auxiliary, and a can, all of this plugs directly into the Haltech. And then boom, you got a harness that's basically ready to go. No adapter harness needed. So we're gonna have auto blip, we're gonna have no lift shifts. It's gonna be badass, even traction control if you want it. On top of that, we have all the other data that you would possibly need. Fuel pressure sensor. Obviously we're gonna have oil pressure. We're gonna add an oil temp as well. The Haltech flex fuel sensor that we added. So everything is labeled. Super nice harness. There's probably way more details that I'll go into in the future, but basically this is the gist of the harness, and it's absolutely badass. It's kind of got like a semi-tuck going on, so we have most of the harness running here. underneath the intake manifold, and then it kind of spreads out to all the areas. So kind of show you guys how I'm gonna have it set up on the car. Here's the flex fuel sensor, and the harness is gonna go in through that hole with a nice little grommet. And then everything is going to plug into my Haltech Elite ECU. And we haven't really talked about suspension yet, but that's because it would take me hours to describe all the work that went into this. This was by far the hardest part of the build. Hone came through with custom front and rear roll centers. Obviously we have Fortunato on board with their 520 Club Sports. My good friend Pat actually machined some custom front upper control arms to make sure we had adequate compression travel, and then tying in the sway bar into the LCA. But I'll get more into detail about the specifics in a later video. All right, let's get the engine in, let's get it up and running, and there it is. So yeah, the electrical system in this car worked really well. The wire plug and play harness had all the sensors I needed, drive-by-wire, and it plugged directly into the Haltech Elite 1500 ECU. So I had all my data in one spot, and then obviously all displayed on the beautiful IC7 dash. So yeah, it just worked out really well, nice and clean and simple, and it's been... So this was a really proud moment, me leaving the garage with the car under its own power, and I'm cheesing. Such a happy moment. This was 6 months straight of endless work. I don't even remember, like, I don't want to calculate how many hours I put into this build, but it was definitely a full-time job at this point, on top of my other full-time job. I basically would lock myself in the garage on weekends, probably what, 7 a.m. in the morning, and I wouldn't leave the garage until after midnight. And that's when I got most of the work done, you know, Saturday, Sunday, and then whenever I could after work. But at this point, I was just exhausted. I just wanted to get this thing done and finally drive it. And here I am super close to doing that. As you can tell, car left the garage, reverse works, the lights work, you know, we had the flashers, the rain light was super bright, and yeah, let's go for a little rip. This is the current situation. Pushing the car because some electricals keep blowing, but I almost made it on the block. So that was a pretty funny situation. I had some metal debris in one of the couplers that kept shorting out the harness. So when I tried to drive it around the block, I actually got stuck and I had to push it home about a quarter of a mile in the pitch darkness. So yeah, pretty easy fix. Got it figured out the next day, pulled the debris out, and everything worked as it should. The pedal box with the drive-by-wire setup, it's so cool. And also take note of how red that steering wheel is. It is not that red anymore. It's pretty gross. But the car overall, it looks so sick at this point. I had the custom widened fenders that I had to make the 17x9 235 work on the front. So the fender is raised, it's widened, it's also radiused. A lot of work to get this car just to turn. We got the EK side skirts and then the JTCC wing. And then here is my friend Chandler, who's gonna take it for a rip around the block, which he also got stuck. But for a different reason. He actually forgot to turn the fuel pump on, so the car just ran out of gas. So I had to go save him, and then, yeah, turn the fuel pump on, and then all was good. But, dude, just watching this car drive away, it just looks so freaking cool. It's got that rat rod look. I kind of wish I could make it look like that again.
It looks so freaking good.
It's like primered and different colors everywhere, and it still looks good.
Yeah, this thing looked tough. And then, yeah, time to put the car on the scales, get it aligned. We got the total weight at 2421, which is actually right around where I expected it to be. Remember, the cage is pretty heavy. And then we have our first cruise. This was actually quite nerve-wracking. It was about 5 to 10 miles from home. Yes, the car is registered and titled. It has license plates and insurance, so no, this was not illegal. But yeah, everything seemed to work all right, and it was time to get the car tuned. So obviously we went to Haltech, my guy Rick here, doing some awesome tuning. Sounded pretty mean. We made about 235 to the wheels on full power, and then we detuned it to around 190 if I recall correctly. And we're ready to test. Off to the first test session. See ya. Love you. So here we are at Gingerman for West Michigan Honda Meets, pulling up to grid. Not gonna lie, I was quite nervous, but yeah, Gingerman's a great track to shake a car down because it's quite safe. I know the track really well, we go here quite often. So the name of the game was to just shake the car down, have fun, and boy, was the car good. Basically, 0 issues all weekend. The car was fantastic. Yeah, like right out of the gate, the car was running 139s, which is pretty good JTCC pace. No real major issues. Everything just worked, which I thought was absolutely incredible. The car was a little loose, but yeah, you know, just kind of dial the setup in. The setup on the car was totally new to me because we're trying a lot of new things, but everything seemed to work out pretty well. And overall, the event was just such a good time. So many good friends. And the pictures that came out of this event are still to this day some of my favorite. Look how badass this car looks on track. I think it's because it's got that rat rod look, but underneath it's a freaking animal. And you can tell this thing is a serious race car just by its stance. And especially, I sit in the back seat. Haven't really mentioned that yet, but I am so far back there I have to look behind the B pillar. It just looks incredible. Absolutely in love with this car. And yeah, love that picture. I did have a few small mistakes, I guess you can say. Luckily, this one didn't really cause any damage. But yeah, the goal was to shake the car down. That's exactly what I did. The car worked flawlessly. So now it's time to get the car liveried up and get it ready for its first event. And for the final step, we have the livery, which was designed by Rob Wilkinson, and he absolutely smashed it. We based it off the hybrid racing branding theme. And on the car, it just looked absolutely incredible. It was so good. I also added a few green accents on the spoiler, side skirt, front and rear lip, and the overall look was epic. So you could say at this point, the car was officially ready to race. And I couldn't have done this without the amazing support from my fiance, Emily. She was by my side the whole way through this build and was able to tolerate all those hours in the garage. So thanks, babe. Love you. So there you go, guys. An entire build completed in just minutes, thanks to the magic of YouTube editing. But in all seriousness, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. That was 7 or 8 months of really hard work. It really pushed my limits, but we got it done. So now let's get back into the action and do some racing.
Get down! New York streets were killers of walk like Pistol Pete and Pappy Mason. Gave the young boys admiration. Prince from Queens and Fritz from Harlem Street.